Number 1. The Lighthouse Keepers of Flann Isles. This island has been known for its paranormal nature all throughout time. There is a small 7th century chapel on that island that was built by Saint Flann himself, and it's been well documented of the ritualistic praying done there during that time, where people would circle the chapel on their knees while praying for hours. It's a spooky place, and many people who didn't even know the history of the island have reported hearing voices and chants when visiting. But here's the story. On December 7th, 1939, 3 very experienced lighthouse keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and William MacArthur, arrived at the Flann Isles lighthouse off the coast of Scotland and began their 2-week-long position as lighthouse keepers. And the way this worked is every couple of weeks, one of the lighthouse keepers would be relieved from duty and replaced with another occasional keeper. Mr. Ducat and Mr. Marshall were very experienced lighthouse keepers and stayed on the island at all times. Their superintendent, Robert Muirhead, went with them. It was routine to check up on the lighthouse and make sure everything was ready to go for the crew. After a short time, the superintendent left and the crew began to settle in. There was no way to communicate with anyone back on the mainland during this time, and the only way the mainland was able to check up on the lighthouse was via telescope, when the conditions were right. So the men would signal for help if they needed to. Around midnight on December 15th, the steamship Arctur passed near the Flann Isles, and the captain noted that there wasn't any light coming from the lighthouse. When he docked a few days later, he informed officials, and so the next day, a Captain Harvey and his crew set out to the island with the new lighthouse keeper, Mr. Moore, to see what was going on, as well as to relieve one of the keepers. As they were arriving, they were surprised to see that none of the crew was waiting to greet them. In fact, there didn't appear to be anybody outside. From the lighthouse, you can clearly see if a ship is coming in, and it was customary for the crew to greet arriving ships. But there had been no preparations made, and nobody was coming down to the dock. It was already a bad sign. So the captain and his crew docked the ship, and the captain sent the new lighthouse keeper up to check on the lighthouse and to see what was going on. Mr. Moore began his ascent on the stairs and would later say that he felt that something was terribly wrong, as if something awful had happened. When he finally gets to the top of the stairs and is facing the lighthouse, he can see that the steel banister leading up to the lighthouse had been bent and folded into itself, and in some areas was even ripped up from the concrete that had been holding it. And he also notices that a giant boulder that had been in front of the lighthouse had moved about 20 feet away, and you could even see the trail from where it was to where it had went. He goes up to the lighthouse door, which was shut, and tries the handle. It was unlocked. He steps in and calls for the lighthouse crew, and as he does, he notices there is food on the table, including open jars and meat, but all the chairs were turned over, and 2 of the 3 jackets were missing from the coat rack. As he searched the lighthouse, he noticed that all the clocks had stopped, all at the same time. That, above all else, turns it from mysterious to creepy. As he searched the bedrooms, he noticed the beds were all unmade, which was very unusual. All of this told Mr. Moore that something incredibly odd had occurred that made the keeper suddenly jump up and leave the lighthouse. So he figures that one hell of a storm must have come through so quickly that they hadn't been prepared for it at all. So Mr. Moore returns to his captain and tells him what he's found, and the captain can't believe what he's hearing. So he and the crew head up to the lighthouse to see it for themselves, and Captain Harvey sends a telegram back to shore, explaining there had been a tragic accident, and that the 3 keepers were gone, and that according to the logs from the men, the accident must have happened about a week ago. They speculated the crew had washed out to sea or drowned trying to secure a crane during the storm. Now, logbooks are customarily used among lighthouse keepers to mark down the events of the day, and the captain and his crew were fortunate enough to find one used by the keepers of this island. At first it was pretty standard, but around December 12th the logs get interesting. The lead keeper, Mr. Ducat, noted that they were experiencing winds unlike any storm he had ever seen in his life. He noted that he's even unsure if the lighthouse will be able to take this bombardment of wind or if it will come down on top of them. He also wrote that the youngest of the other keepers had been down on his knees praying for most of the day, and the other, a very experienced old man known on the mainland as a hardened individual, had been sobbing. Now these are very, very experienced lighthouse keepers that are acting like this. This was extremely out of character. The entries on the 13th and 14th marked that they don't believe they are going to survive. At this point, all of them had been praying all day and just expecting at any moment the lighthouse would give way to the terrible storm. Now on the 15th, the logbook just says, "Storm ended. Sea is calm. God is over all." But what happened to the men after that? Did they go down to the shore to secure something and get swept away by a wave from the aftermath of the storm? It just didn't make sense. But the craziest news was yet to come. When the news of this investigation reached the Scottish mainland, the residents of the mainland were quick to inform the lead investigators something they weren't expecting to hear. There had never been a storm, and not only that, but the entire week of the 12th, they said they had more visibility to the island during that time than they had all year. So what do you think happened? If there was never a storm, what was it that the lighthouse keepers experienced? And what about all the damage? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Number 2, the disappearance of Lars Matank. Lars Matank was a 28-year-old German man who went missing in July 2014 while on vacation with a couple of friends in Golden Sands, Bulgaria. Trouble started when he got into a fight with some rival football fans on the beach. Things got out of hand quickly and he ended up with a ruptured eardrum. The day before the flight home, he and his friends went to the bar to settle down and get something to eat. But this is where things get strange. While his friends went inside to order food, Lars stayed outside for some reason and wouldn't say why. When they came out a short while later, he was nowhere to be seen. They waited around for a while but decided he may have went back to the hotel. But when they get to the room, he was nowhere to be seen. His friends figured that he may have just decided to go out by himself and that he would probably get back to the hotel sometime later, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Well, it turns out they were right. When they wake up, Lars is back at the room, but he has a very odd story to tell. Allegedly, he'd been approached by a group of Russian men who were hired to attack him by the same people he had fought the day before. Well, pretty much, his friends didn't think he was making much sense, so they wrote it off and were just glad that he was back since that was the day they were leaving. Before they went to the airport, his friends took him to see a doctor about his ear, and he was prescribed cefuroxime, an antibiotic routinely prescribed for ear infections, and was advised to wait a day before traveling, or else he could risk permanent injury to his eardrum. He told his friends that they should still take their scheduled flight, and he would just fly home separately. But that night would turn into a terrible night for Mr. Matank. At 10 minutes to midnight, Lars called his mother and told her he was terrified, and he said that someone knew his credit card information, and that he needed her to cancel all of them before hanging up. He was seen on hotel cameras pacing the hallways and ducking into elevators before leaving the hotel for an hour, and nobody knows where he went. He then called his mother again at 3 a.m. and told her in a low whisper that he was hiding from a group of men who were trying to kill him, and had been following him everywhere he went. He called his mother at dawn and said he was able to avoid the group all night, but that they were still coming, and was worried that they weren't going to let him leave. But he was able to flag down a taxi, and he made his way to the airport. Once at the airport, he called his mother again, and she advised him to get his ear checked by the airport doctor before boarding. The airport doctor cleared him to fly, but noticed he was acting nervous and erratic. A few moments later, a construction worker entered the waiting room, and Matank screamed and yelled, "I don't want to die here, I have to get out of here," and jumped up and ran out of the waiting room, leaving his luggage behind. All he had on him were his clothes. He ran straight out of the airport, then scaled an 8-foot fence with barbed wire, and ran into the forest behind it. That was the last known sighting of Lars Matank. Poor guy. What do you think happened to him? Number 3. The man who disappeared into the Paris catacombs. Known as the world's largest grave, the Paris catacombs is a giant labyrinth of connected tunnels reaching as far as, wait for it, 200 miles. Did you hear that? 200 miles of maze-like ossuaries filled with over 6 million people's remains just 20 meters under the city of Paris. In the 1700s, the cemeteries in the city were overflowing, and so officials decided to relocate all the bodies in the local cemeteries down to the catacombs, and many of the bones were stacked to create the walls of the tunnels. The tourist section is lit up where there are many decorations made out of bones and skulls, but most of the catacombs are unlit, pitch-black hallways, and rooms with bones piling up to the ceiling from when they were dumped down there. There are also many hallways that have been flooded with bones or water due to the floors collapsing. Needless to say, it's incredibly easy to get lost down there. Many have gone in and never come out. The deeper you go, the harder it is to find your way out, but still, because it is so dangerous, many urban explorers love the challenge. Which leads me to this found footage that was discovered, caked with dust and mold, in the early 1990s. The footage shows an unidentified man becoming increasingly disoriented as he moves through the passageways of the crumbling stone and human bones, illuminated only by the camera's light. With each new turn within the subterranean labyrinth, it's soon apparent this man has no idea where he is, or how he's going to get out. He ends up seeing some weird markings. Not long after, you can hear his breathing pick up, and you can tell he's terrified as he begins to run frantically around in the catacombs, when all of a sudden he drops his camera, which is his only light source, and runs away, never to be seen again. Nobody knows who this man was or if he made it out, but knowing that he dropped his only light source, it's not likely that he ever got out. He may still be down there with many other urban explorers that got lost in the depths of this enormous grave. Number 4. The Disappearance of Maura Murray. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old New Hampshire nursing student completing her junior year at the University of Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student, had a good relationship with her boyfriend, and was well loved by her many friends and family. Her life seemed to be going well until one afternoon on Monday, February 9th, 2004. As she was leaving the university campus, she emailed her professors and work supervisors, saying that she was taking a week off due to a death in the family. But this was not true. According to her family, there had not been a death during that time. But at 7:27 p.m. that night, a local woman reported that Maura's car had crashed into a snowbank off a sharp corner of Route 112. And another motorist even stopped and asked her if she needed any help, but she said no, claiming to have already called roadside assistance. When she had not, the motorist offered to let her stay nearby at his home out of the cold while she waited, but she declined and said that she wanted to stay in the car. So he left, and within 10 minutes, law enforcement had arrived at the scene, but Maura had already disappeared, and she has never been found. The following day, a missing person report was filed and a huge search was issued. Her friends and family helped look. Dogs were brought in and there were many volunteers, but nothing turned up. But listen to this. On the flight over, her boyfriend Billy got a call. But because he was on the flight, he didn't see anything until he landed. But he had a voicemail. It sounded like Maura, and she was crying. The call was immediately traced to a burner prepaid phone, and the police found that the phone was issued to the American Red Cross, and so they considered the call to be unrelated to Maura. The Murray family and her boyfriend did not believe this for a second, because why in the world would the American Red Cross call Billy? Sobbing. In 2007, a $75,000 reward was offered for any information on what happened to her, but none of the leads ever went anywhere. And here's a sick twist. In 2012, on the exact date when Maura disappeared, a YouTuber named 112 Dirtbag posted a video titled Happy Anniversary. It shows a very creepy old man laughing hysterically at the camera. The name 112 is the exact number of the route that she disappeared on, and Dirtbag was the name Maura's father gave the person responsible for her disappearance. The video has since been taken down and Maura still remains missing. Many regard 112 Dirtbag's video as just a cruel joke. But what do you think? Number 5. The Jameson Family. Now this one is creepy. It seems that everything that we learned during this case just added more questions. In October 2009, the 3 members of the Jameson family, 44-year-old Bobby, 40-year-old Sherilyn, and 6-year-old Madison, were living another day in their home in Eufaula, Oklahoma, on a nice lakefront property. Well, I say nice, but the family had their share of problems in the home. They believed that the home was haunted by several ghosts, and they were even looking to move away from that home and start somewhere fresh. So on October 9th, the family left to find a property in Red Oak and hadn't come back for a few weeks. Eventually, a couple of hunters found their truck, way out in the middle of nowhere, still locked. In the truck, investigators found the Jamesons' wallet, purse, cell phones, and $32,000 cash in a bank bag under the seat, as well as the Jamesons' malnourished dog, Macy, who incredibly was still alive. Investigators decided to check the phones to see if they would give any information to where the Jameson family went, and noticed that Bobby had taken a picture of Madison before they disappeared. This image raised a lot of questions because it's unclear what emotion Madison is showing, and it's also unclear who took the photo. But her arms are crossed, and as you can see on her shirt, there's a large red substance, but nobody can be sure what it is or what caused it. Also, the Jamesons had a surveillance camera at their home, and investigators were able to retrieve the footage. The video showed the Jamesons on the day that they left, but the video only led to more questions. The sheriff would even say upon investigating that they seemed to be in some sort of trance. While packing the truck, they took about 50 trips back and forth between the house, many times carrying nothing at all the way to the truck and then back to the house again. Strangest of all, many times throughout the video, they would just stop walking and look up for several minutes before walking off again. They never once spoke to each other throughout the video. Investigators were able to use their phone's GPS systems to track where they had been, and it did show that for whatever reason, they decided to drive way out to this remote location, park, get out of the car, and walk up this trail toward the top of the mountain for nearly 20 minutes before coming back down to the truck, and that's where the phone stayed. So a large search was started, and while officials were up on the trail investigating where the phone's GPS had been, they found adult footprints, as well as the footprints of a child, confirming that they had been there, but no bodies were found. They brought in helicopters and dogs, but nothing was discovered. So 4 years go by, and some hikers are up in the Panola Mountains, about 2.5 miles away from where the truck was found. They discovered the 3 corpses of the Jameson family, lying side by side, face down on the ground. The medical examiner was not able to determine their cause of death, but there was a giant hole in the back of Bobby's head, as well as small holes throughout the bones of the others, which could have been from bullets, but nobody is sure. What do you think happened to them? I would love to hear what you think about this case. Well, that was 5 of some of the most mysterious disappearances throughout time. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you'd like to see more and would like to see the channel grow, leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell if you'd like to be notified when I post another video. Stay safe out there. You never know who's waiting for you around the corner.